Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Idea to iPhone Master Course. My name is Carla White, and today I'm talking with the young and passionate entrepreneur, Harshita Aurora, about how Idea to iPhone saved her latest startup. And she wrote to me earlier this week. She said, Idea to iPhone is an absolute lifesaver, which, by the way, has been feverishly used. So welcome, Harshita. Harshita left traditional schooling a year ago to become an entrepreneur and doesn't plan on attending college in the future. And she has already launched an app, most recently with MIT, which is extremely impressive, called Universe Eating. Very clever. Cooking Reimagined. So college cooking reimagined. Harshita, thank you for joining me on this interview, and I just want to jump right in. I have a list of questions, but first I want to start out with your background and experience with producing apps so that other folks who want to produce apps in our audience understand who you are, where you're coming from, and how they can relate to their experience. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself as far as background, education, experience, those sort of things?
Sure. From an education perspective, I went to school until 8th grade until I realized that I wanted to be a tech entrepreneur and have apps and websites of my own to be instead of having a typical 9 to 5 job, because I found creating things and building solutions to problems that I found interesting. So last year when I was 15, I applied for an internship at Salesforce. And I got in and I interned there for about a month. That was my first exposure to the tech world as an intern at a very large company in Bangalore, India. So there I learned a lot of software development principles and basically understood what market wants and other intricacies of the process. And once I came back, I got super pumped up and wanting to have my own startups. So I started working on a website that didn't work out that well, but I applied at a summer program at MIT called MIT Launch, which is meant for young entrepreneurs who want to come together in a team and launch a tech startup of their own while living at MIT dorm for about a month. And recently this summer, I attended the program and my team and I launched an app called University, which is a social networking app which connects college students so that they can come together and cook together and bond over cooking and split so that they can also eat healthier, since cooking is such a time-consuming process, especially when you're in college. When I came back, even though I did not contribute a lot to the app development process, I was much more in the business parts of it, marketing part of it, but I learned a lot about different iOS libraries and frameworks from my teammates who were working on the app mostly. So when I came back from the US, I wanted to build my own apps, and I had like a ton of ideas. I started researching on all of them, and I started learning Swift on my own recently. And 4 months in, I have this idea of building a cryptocurrency price tracking app, which targets cryptocurrency enthusiasts and not necessarily serious investors. So yeah, that's a good overview.
So, how long ago did you start your cryptocurrency app?
I started working on it only 10 days ago because I had been learning and building projects just for practice, and I identified this problem after talking to people only 10 days ago.
Okay, so, and how did you come across my book, Idea to iPhone?
So I think I've been I think I own it since about a year. I think I came across it in Amazon recommendations, and I ordered it because of I clicked on it because of the beautiful cover, and I opened it and I read a description, and I think I went on the website and it seemed like it's a very structured way of having a look at the whole process from point A to point Z, and like it seemed like everything that I needed to know instead of having to Google everything and try to figure out and connecting the dots on my own. So I ordered the book and I started reading it. Initially, it was very overwhelming because there were a lot of things and they were also discussed in detail. But I realized that was a plus point because that meant that I won't have to spend hours trying to figure out maybe how to design navigation in my app, or how to promote my app on social media, or how to hire developers. And all those little nuts and bolts of building an app were all put together in a very structured way. And I knew that you are probably a J in MBTI because it was super structured and organized, and it seemed like as if you were noting down every single thing as you started on your journey until the point when you started writing the book. I am also an obsessive note taker, but sometimes, and the only thing that I tend to remember is where my note about something is. So I felt like super organized and was told, and I didn't, and most of the books that are about building apps are about get quick rich schemes kind of thing. They do not really share any valuable practical advice, and more about the self-help stuff, which I hadn't benefited from reading. So this was super organized and super practical, and I started reading it last year to understand how I could come up with ideas, because every time I used to come up with ideas for apps, they were either too impractical and not technologically possible to build, or because they just seemed so silly that it felt like no one would ever want to use it because it doesn't have any practical application. So I started to look at the market of people who use apps from a different angle after reading the chapter on shaping your ideas, the chapter 2 in it, and also reading about design and what I might need to learn in order to build apps before I can get started on a project. So I started learning design software, specifically Sketch. I had experience with Photoshop, but because I read on the internet that Sketch is being used these days more often by developers and designers. So I started learning Sketch, and I got some learning from it. And then I also started learning a little bit Swift only recently. So I think it is a very good book because it's super organized. It has everything in the right amount of detail for someone who wants a guide on how to build your app from the day you think of an idea to the point where you want the app on the App Store, and even further beyond that when you want to update it.
So when you talked about ideas that weren't practical, what sort of things made them impractical? How did you know if your idea is a good idea or a bad idea?
So a recent example, before I started working on cryptocurrency app, I thought of an idea where people could set a code word, and when they would say that word, like Hey Siri and that word, the phone would play music and turn on the flashlight. So I thought this would work with SiriKit, and I started coding it, and only to discover that Apple has defined the domains in which you can use SiriKit, and you cannot use it for like do Y if X is said. Not yet. Apple doesn't have that. So it has certain domains, and if your app fits that domain, only then you can use SiriKit and use Siri in your app. Right. So that was technologically impossible. Not technologically impossible, but more like something that Apple hasn't allowed yet. Yeah. Yeah, and some ideas were, I keep noting ideas in a file in my computer where app ideas. So, but they seem like too far-fetched at this point, and I think like as a young and a beginner in this industry, I need to start with something that is smaller and start working on bigger projects as I learn from the small projects. And it also reduces the risk, because a lot of times, even if you have idea validation, you cannot predict a lot about the market. So you need to put out your app and test how it does in the market. So other impractical ideas were usually the ones where I would just do a quick Google search, and either there would be an app or a Chrome extension for it already, or it just seemed like someone has tried it before and they have failed in building it. And a lot of the ideas that I used to have required some level of machine learning knowledge to build. And it is from back then when Apple did not have Core ML, which Apple recently launched in 2017. And also because I didn't have background in machine learning, which I am currently learning on the side usually. So I think like technologically, usually a Google search for maybe 5 minutes can tell you if your app idea has potential. And then doing more research and market research, and usually it helps to ask people in your network, people who give you honest feedback, and asking on specific subreddits also helps. So that I think has been helpful. But for some ideas, you think like it's possible and you start coding it like I did with that SiriKit app. I was 3 days in, I had already learned how to do SiriKit, only to realize that the domains are very limited.
Right.
So sometimes it takes 5 minutes to discover that your idea is impractical, and sometimes it could take weeks to discover that. The sooner you discover, the better.
But how about startup capital or connections in Silicon Valley? Do you feel like you need all of those to have a successful app?
If we're talking about only mobile apps, then no. It helps to have connections, because then you can get introduced to developers or designers or any other person that you need to build your app. Sometimes it helps because if you have connections in an area that is populated with talented engineers and designers like Silicon Valley, then it helps. But that's certainly not the requirement. You can hire freelancers online on Upwork. You can access all the information. Most of the good quality information is always on the internet. You just have to do a quick Google search and know where to look for, which you also learn in the process of researching. And I think like it helps, but it's not a requirement and certainly shouldn't stop you. But I personally aspire to be there soon because I don't want to just stop at mobile apps. I want to be successful at mobile apps and then go on to build software and be a Silicon Valley entrepreneur in the future.
So you seem very technologically savvy. You're naming off things that probably some of our audience aren't aware of what these are. And do you feel like it's possible for somebody who doesn't have that technology background to still be able to make an app?
I think, yeah, because if you have an app idea and you know what exactly you want to build and you've done good amount of research on what needs to be there, and you know where to look for designers and developers, and you can hire, and you have the budget to hire them. It's more important to have a certain amount of, depending on how complex your app is and how many features and screens you'll have, it's going to get more expensive. But it helps to be a developer. Again, it helps to have the technological knowledge, but it's certainly not a requirement. But if you enjoy making apps and you're doing it just because you like to make apps, then of course you need to learn. But if you're making apps because it seems like a fun thing to do or because you want to earn extra income, then initial investment of a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 would be important.
Yeah, and a Mac.
And a Mac, yeah. Well, I mean, you can dual boot on your Windows too, but that usually causes more headaches.
Right. So you've been on this app journey for well over a year. You just started your last app a few weeks ago. And where are you at now in that process, having started a few weeks ago?
10 days ago.
Oh, 10 days ago, yes.
Yeah. So in that, I have made some notes on the user data that I've gotten from interviewing people on my network and people on Reddit, etc. And people who are very invested in the cryptocurrency area, mostly from Quora.com. And after I did that for about a week, I started to define what the design would look like, and I came up with the main interface and the design of the screen, another screen that would be led from there, and 2 more screens. So I just sketched them, and today I quickly built an MVP, a very little version of the app that I want to have, just as a proof of concept that this is what I want and this is how it's gonna look like, the main interface.
So what
So
did
I
you
think like,
use to build your MVP?
what did I use to build my MVP? I used the CryptoWatch API. So I made a API call. Well, from scratch, I used CocoaPods.
Okay.
I installed CocoaPods in my to be able to make the API call because Swifty, JSON, and Elamifier make the whole process much easier. So I just copy pasted the URL of the CryptoWatch and I wrote the method and parsed JSON to have the value of Bitcoin, the latest value of it, and update the label text to that particular value. And then I ran some tests and it was the latest value, which I checked across different exchanges. So that was just a proof of concept that I know how to parse JSON and also make an API call. So that was the...
So you touched on a couple of really important things. First, you talked about research. You expressed the importance of doing your research first. So what sort of research are you referring to? Is it Googling your idea? Is it finding your user group? What sort of research do you recommend?
Good question. I think it depends on what area you're touching in the app, in what category of apps you're making. But mostly a quick Google search really helps in clicking on the top links to read about it. So if you were building an app for, for festivals, for planning festivals, so doing a quick search on what the apps that are out there are and trying them out and seeing if what you want to do is any different from what is already existing, because the app market is pretty saturated with apps. But you can always come up with something that is better and still get a lot of downloads. There's always opportunity. As long as there's need, there's opportunity. And that is the need that you have to identify. And the only reason we do market validation is to avoid the risk of building something that will not get downloaded for someone, by anyone, and saving our time and energy. Because we all have a lot of ideas and we want to build those ideas, and it's difficult to select one. So it always helps to do a little bit of research so that you know which one has the most amount of market need. Another way to do good research is probably going to Google Trends. So you can so you can search on Google Trends what exactly are people looking for. So you can put that term festival planning, and you can see how many people are searching for it and how has the trend been going on. So let's say you were building a plugin for, or some tool that helps you in playing the game Pokemon Go. So you can look at Google Trends at how the trend has been going on. You can have a look at the graph, so you would know that this is getting famous or not. And you can also check out Google Keywords, Google AdWords Keyword Planner, where you can also you can know exactly the number of people, and you can also know the competition out there, the number of websites that have services similar to that, so that you can gauge the amount of interest that is out there for something that solves a problem in the domain that you're Googling about. And next step, once you've figured that there's no app like that out there that you want to build and that there is market need for an app that solves this particular problem, you can talk to people that are close to you, family, friends, and people on that you're connected to. Most of my connections are online, so I just usually message them and I ask for their honest feedback. And I ask them, would you pay for an app like this? And then they talk about that this is what I'm currently using, but I would want to have a better version of it, or I would totally use that app, or I would not use that app. I don't think I would care about it, etc. And the responses can range from, depending on how explicit your question is. They can even give you feedback on individual parts of your query. And that is a good enough research if you interview 5 to 10 people, which can give you a good amount of feedback and also maybe ideas for more features in your in the idea that you had. I've certainly benefited from it, from talking to people who have invested in cryptocurrencies and people who are just generally interested in cryptocurrencies. They have come up with all sorts of things that they would want to have in an app, which is better than the currently existing apps.
So you also touched on releasing MVP, which is minimal viable product, which I absolutely think is essential. Get your idea on the App Store. Don't think about making it so feature rich, but focus on the one important feature. And can you talk a little bit about that and your experience with that?
The MVP. If the technology is the core product, is the core part of your product, then it's very important to have the MVP because it serves as a proof of concept that technology is easy to build or it's possible to build it. Because a lot of times people invest a lot of resources only to find out that it's not technically possible to build something. But if it is possible to build it technically, then you need an MVP of, it's good to have a product that looks like the bare bones of your final, what your final product, what your final app would look like. Something that doesn't necessarily have all the beautiful design, but something that works, something that serves the purpose that you're trying to solve. And then you can, I think an MVP should not take more than 1/10 of all the time you're going to be spending on your product, and even less than that. So you shouldn't be really investing too much time on your MVP. And your MVP can guide you. It can be like your guide of what your final product would look like, and it just gives you a relief that it's possible to build something. And you can also show your MVP around in your network, who can then give you feedback on maybe they would want some changes in the design, or maybe they would want something else. So it helps to build, and you really don't need any extra skills to be able to build an MVP. It's the same process. You need to code and you need to design. And if you can do either of those, and you can always hire people who can help you with that.
Yeah, and the minimal viable product doesn't have to absolutely operate on a phone. It could be just sketches of your app as well. And you could start getting feedback straight away from the sketches to make sure they make sense to people. And then you can go into Sketch, the Sketch app, and lay out the screens. And there's tools to click them together. So a button actually opens up the next screen and they can transition nicely. And that you can put on your phone and put in front of people and get feedback. And tell me why it's important to get feedback before you get on the App Store.
It is super, super important because they are like your users. And if you don't have feedback, then the only source of data is you. You want people to give you feedback and make sure that they give you honest feedback and not just something that makes you happy. And they can suggest you changes that can potentially save you a lot of time, because when you put it out in the App Store and you read negative reviews by other people, you can already fix those things. And you can also give out your app once it's fully developed to your people in your network to test it and report bugs or suggest you any changes. Could be design changes, could be a feature that they want. And feedback happens at a lot of different levels. When you start out with your app, you want feedback on your idea and the kind of things that you should have in your app. And then you reach the design stage where you can get feedback from people, because at the end of the day, even if you're a designer, you need people because you're designing for people. And you want to hear from people what they think about it. And when it comes to development, you generally don't need people's feedback on your code. You need people's feedback on how the code works. If there are bugs or if there's anything that they cannot understand, which is more to do with the user experience. So it's important to have feedback from people at every stage. And even if you don't have any friends and your family is not interested, then there are websites like Uber Testers, or you can engage in online communities like Reddit or Quora, where people won't be as invested as people that are close to you, but they can still give you feedback that will help you get a different perspective and know things outside. Because a lot of times it happens with me when I'm working constantly. I think like, am I working on something that is actually going to be put out there? Is it something people are going to want, or am I just working because I think I need to work? So it usually helps to ask someone who might or might not be good with making apps. But because they are a consumer of these apps or a customer of apps, they will know what is good and what is not.
Exactly. Thank you. And your input has been so encouraging to, I hope, many of viewers of this video. I really hope to disrupt the App Store with young entrepreneurs, old entrepreneurs, but solo entrepreneurs. And I think the benefits of being a solo entrepreneur is that you can change quickly. And, you're absolute proof of how quickly an app can come from being just an idea. I mean, in 10 days, you have a working prototype. That's huge. That's really big. I think people get caught up in figuring out the details of the app, the features of the app, will it sell or not, and they just got to move forward. They got to make those quick decisions, and that's the benefit of the solo entrepreneur. So thank you very, very much for sharing your story. And I want to know, how can I or the larger community help you succeed in the next steps of your app?
Well, I think I would be launching the app in February, so the biggest help would be to download it
Yes.
when it launches. I'm naming it Crypto Price Tracker, so it should be easy to find out. I'll have a website too,
Okay.
so you can reach out. And I think that would be a good enough help. As for help from you, I think I'll probably need connections with the freelancers if I can have a talk with them and talk about my project if they would be interested in working on the project, and I can hire them so I can skip the interview hiring process of freelancers.
Right.
And maybe having you as a mentor throughout for your feedback on designs or for your feedback on the on what the product is becoming. Maybe like once a week sharing the work and the progress that has been made, because you've been through all of this so many times in the last 10 years. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll do is, when your website is up and running, I will post the link to that. And when the app is on the App Store, I'll post the link to that. I'll have information about how to connect with you, your LinkedIn profile, all of that. I'll provide all of that. So if anybody who is just starting on their journey has questions, because I know when I was in your shoes and more than 10 days into my project, I feel I was more like 3 months into my project, and my first app project, I had no idea who to turn to. And the interesting thing about the app developers community is that although the App Store is extremely competitive, the community is really cohesive and helpful. I feel the developers, when you reach out to them, they're extremely helpful in pointing you in the right direction. So it's good to have you part of that community, and it's a good basis of that is to continue to share and share and share and share. So best of luck with your app, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more of you in the future, and especially when you're on the cover of Time Magazine as Entrepreneur of the Year. Sometime very soon, I have a feeling, with your passion. And I think key to all of this is your passion, because creating an app is not something you can do overnight. It's not a quick win. It's not something you do in a week. It's a long haul. It's an investment, and having passion about your idea and the direction about the project is huge. And the payoffs of having that passion and getting your app on the App Store are even better. So I'm sure you're going to get there, and I look forward to helping you out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.